Hello and welcome back to Bullets for Bucks. I'm your host Stephen Bresnaugh, and today we're going to be talking about 6mm Creedmoor versus 6.5mm Creedmoor. So we're going to be talking about this in relation to those interested in long-range shooting and those interested in also using it at long range in hunting, or those interested in just using it for hunting. So we're going to do a little bit of comparison here and some of my experiences with both. Now I've had a 6.5 Creedmoor, this one right here, for over a year, and I love this rifle. This happens to be a Howa HS Precision. And then I have also had this 6mm Creedmoor. This is the Howa Orcs, for about a year. I have had other 6.5mm Creedmoors or 6.5 Creedmoors for now I think about 3 years, and I've used them extensively on the range, out to and past 1,000 yards, and I've also used the 6mm just in target shooting primarily, but I've had a lot of experience with both. What is the 6.5 Creedmoor and the 6mm Creedmoor? Well, both these cartridges were introduced by Hornady. Of course, the 6.5 was introduced some time ago actually by Hornady, and more recently the 6mm Creedmoor was introduced by Hornady. The 6.5 Creedmoor, of course, has a bullet that's in the class of the .264 caliber. So it's about equivalent to a .264 bullet. And we have over here the 6mm, and that's about equivalent to the .243 class bullet. Now, the 6.5 Creedmoor most people know about, and if you don't, you can go ahead and look at more detailed information on just this cartridge alone. But the 6mm Creedmoor is the same cartridge, the same casing as the 6.5, except they've necked it down to a 6mm bullet. So it's been necked down smaller to a 6mm bullet. This allows the 6mm to shoot a lighter projectile at a higher velocity. So there's just some really basics on what each one is. Both are extremely accurate. Both are easily capable of half MOA groups or sub-half MOA groups, even with factory ammunition. Like I said, let's go and talk about the 6mm Creedmoor first, and then we'll talk about the 6.5 and how it compares in a bit. So the 6mm Creedmoor shoots, like I said, about a 105, 108 grain bullet. Now, of course, you can use some other weight bullets than that, but that is how most of the bullets, I believe, that Hornady sells in factory offerings come in the 105 or 108 grains. So depending on the load, now I know if you hand load, some of this isn't going to be as applicable to you because you can do things a certain way, but we're going to be kind of looking at factory and how it performs factory ammunition wise. So because this bullet is lighter, it's 105 grains, this happens to be a Hornady black ammunition factory load here, it will shoot at a higher velocity. So you're looking more between the 2,900 and 3,000 feet per second with the 6mm Creedmoor, whereas with the 6.5 Creedmoor, you're looking at speeds usually more in the 28 or 2,900 feet per second. So, but because this bullet is lighter, it has a lower BC, and that ballistic coefficient, basically what it means is it's going to have more wind deflection. So this bullet is going to deflect more in the wind. It's going to be affected more by heavy wind at extended ranges than the 6.5mm higher BC bullet. The pro of this is that it's going to be lighter recoil because it has a smaller, lighter bullet. The rifle recoils far less. So that allows you to stay on target or have you maintain your sight picture with rapidly firing or firing from different shooting positions in a hurry, which makes this more appetizing in certain competitions, especially where ranges are 600 yards or less. So basically the big pros of the 6mm Creedmoor are it's going to have lighter recoil, so you're going to be able to maintain that sight picture a lot easier. And it's going to, in some cases, depending on the factory ammunition or reload, is going to shoot flatter out to a certain distance than the 6.5. And that's basically the pros of the 6mm Creedmoor. Now, some of the cons of the 6mm Creedmoor like I said, because it is a lighter bullet, like I said, it's going to have way more wind deflection than the 6.5 Creedmoor. And so it's going to be affected by the wind at extended distances more than the 6.5 Creedmoor with the higher BC, heavier bullet. Another con is you're also going to find far less factory offerings in this caliber. So when it comes to 6mm Creedmoor, there's very, very few factory ammunition offerings by companies on the market. You might have two choices at your local gun shop to buy ammunition for your rifle with the 6mm Creedmoor, and you'll probably have upwards of 5, 10, maybe even more options when it comes to factory offerings in the 6.5 Creedmoor, which for somebody that doesn't reload, that's a big deal. Also, you're going to have less availability. So not only will you have more options with the 6.5 Creedmoor ammunition-wise, but you're going to have more availability. Some stores I've been in don't carry the 6mm at all, and they have tons in the 6.5 Creedmoor. Also, with the 6mm Creedmoor, you're going to have a faster barrel burnout, a lower barrel life. So your barrel life isn't going to be as long on a 6mm Creedmoor because it's shooting at those much, much higher velocities than the 6.5 Creedmoor. Another con of the 6mm Creedmoor is you're going to have less foot-pounds of energy. Because this has a lower BC lighter bullet, like I've said, you're going to have less foot-pounds of energy. So if you're looking at using, buying one, and you're looking between the 6mm Creedmoor and the 6.5 Creedmoor, and there's any possibility of you hunting large game or big game with it, keep in mind that this is going to have a lot less foot-pounds of energy than the 6.5 Creedmoor will. Of course, that does depend on the load still, but generally speaking, it's going to have far less. And therefore, as an industry standard, is really not appropriate for game probably bigger than an antelope. I would not think that the 6mm Creedmoor is appropriate for elk. Of course, it could take an elk given proper bullet placement and the right kind of bullet, but it is not the right choice for elk. It's light. It's probably not going to be the best ethically, and if you make a mistake, there's going to be less forgiveness there. Also, if you're looking at shooting long range, what I mean by that is beyond 800 yards. Well, the 6mm Creedmoor may shoot, depending on the load, is flat or flatter than the 6.5 Creedmoor. It's going to have that greater wind deflection, and one of the biggest things that people don't think about is it's going to have less splash. So if you're calling your own shots on a long range and you're trying to figure out where you shot and missed so that you can make a correction in the scope or reticle, you're not going to be able to do that as easy with the 6mm Creedmoor because the splash is going to be smaller than with the 6.5 Creedmoor. So to kind of cap it off, it is less versatile. If you're looking at all to use the same rifle for hunting, there's going to be less splash and more wind deflection at longer ranges. It is going to be lighter recoiling, and you are going to be able to maintain your sight picture easier with this, and some people might find it easier to shoot precise because it is lighter recoiling. The 6.5 Creedmoor has a higher BC, which means it's a heavier bullet, so it's going to deflect less in the wind. Okay, so you're going to have less wind deflection. The next thing is you're going to have a bigger splash because it's a heavier bullet basically, so you should be able to see your splash better, especially if you're calling your own hits, and therefore be able to make corrections a little bit easier at ranges beyond probably 800 yards with the 6.5 Creedmoor. You might say, well, you just said that you can maintain sight picture better with the 6mm Creedmoor, and to a certain degree that is to a certain degree, depending on your rifle setup, that is true. A lot of that depends on your rifle weight and your fundamentals. However, at ranges out that far, you're going to probably be using a scope that has a pretty wide field of view at ranges that far, and you should still be able to see your splash quite easily. Now, also with the 6.5 Creedmoor, you're going to have more foot-pounds of energy because it is a heavier bullet. So that allows it to be far more versatile and more ethical to take on larger game, such as maybe the occasional elk, and certainly deer and mule deer. Another thing is there's going to be way more factory ammunition available. So if you're not planning on reloading or you're just getting into this game, the 6.5 Creedmoor is going to be far better to go with because you're going to have a ton of choices and you're going to be able to find something that your rifle likes really well and shoots really well. Whereas if you go with the 6mm Creedmoor and you don't reload, If your rifle doesn't look like, you know, 2 of the loads out there that you can find in your store, then you're kind of screwed. I mean, you can't, I mean, there's not a lot of options out there. Another thing is availability. So not only is there more options, but there's far more availability. What that means is pretty much every store out there in the United States, and even many around the world now, are going to carry 6.5 millimeter Creedmoor ammo. So because of that, if you run into a pinch, you should be able to find some ammunition that fits into your gun, you know, that your gun is chambered for, and not be a SOL. So pros: higher BC, less wind deflection, more versatile for hunting because it has more foot-pounds energy, far more options as far as even just the rifles available as well. So like with 6 millimeter Creedmoor, you might only be able to find a few rifles that are chambered in that for sale, and have far less options just in the rifle itself and picking a rifle. Whereas in the 6.5, you should have tons of options out there as far as picking a rifle. So the cons of the 6.5 Creedmoor. It's going to be a little bit heavier recoiling, so if you are shooting a really light rifle, it might be a little bit more difficult to shoot precisely if you're recoil sensitive than the 6 millimeter Creedmoor. Also, that may cause issues with maintaining your sight picture, especially at close distances, because it's, like I said, heavier recoiling. But it's still very light. It's not a heavy recoiling round. Depending on the load, a lot of this depends on the load, but depending on the load, depending on the factory ammunition, it might have more drop, bullet drop, than the 6 millimeter Creedmoor. In other words, it might not shoot as flat as the 6 millimeter Creedmoor. So anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. It's not super in depth, but it's kind of like, hey, here are some of the basics. If you're looking to just get into target shooting at 600 yards or less, or 800 yards or less, and you're looking at, you know, you have a store in mind, or you're going to reload where you know you can get the ammunition, I wouldn't count the 6 millimeter Creedmoor out. If you're looking into PRS competition or something like that, I definitely would not count the 6 millimeter Creedmoor out. I'd probably look at that and maybe choose that over the 6.5. If I'm looking at long range, and I'm looking at, you know, beyond 800 yards and so, and I want a lot of factory ammunition availability and so on and so forth, I'd probably look at the 6.5 Creedmoor. If I'm looking at doing a little bit of both or a lot of both, I'm definitely going to look at the 6.5 Creedmoor over the 6 millimeter Creedmoor. Anyways, hope you enjoyed this video. Remember to like and subscribe below. Leave me a comment, and, you know, go ahead and say what your opinion is in the comments below.